This is Jim Havens. Thank you for listening to the Station of the Cross, proclaiming the fullness of truth with clarity and charity.
Heard around the world on your Android and Apple mobile devices.
The Simple Truth, rising up to explore the difficult topics of real life. Join us as we proclaim the good, the true, and the beautiful with the simple truth of Jesus Christ and His Holy Catholic Church through Scripture, tradition, and the Catechism. And now, your host, Jim Havens.
It is great to be back with you on The Simple Truth. We consecrate everything to the Sacred Heart of Jesus through the Immaculate Heart of Mary and the pure, strong heart of St. Joseph. Today is Testimony Tuesday, where we bring you real, live, first-hand testimonial accounts of the life-giving reality of Jesus and His Catholic Church. Our guest today is Dr. Jaime Obst. She is a Catholic wife and mother of 5, I believe, also a medical doctor, board certified in obstetrics and gynecology. She received her medical degree at the Ohio University College of Osteopathic Medicine and completed her residency in obstetrics and gynecology at Sisters of Charity Hospital in Buffalo, New York, where she was also working as an OBGYN for the past 8.5 years until recently. Dr. Obst is fluent in Spanish and has volunteered in Ecuador as a medical and catechetical missionary. And I'd also mention she delivered our youngest son about 4.5 years ago and was absolutely outstanding, calm, caring, truly listens and serves her patients, really everything you'd want your doctor to be. And we are blessed to have her here to share some of her story with us today. Dr. Obst, thank you for being with us. How are you today?
Hi, Jim. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Outstanding. So let's begin at the beginning with your childhood. What was your early life like, your family, the culture that you grew up in?
Oh, great. Yeah, I had a kind of unusual childhood in that my family grew up moving frequently and living overseas. My dad worked in oil when I was younger, so we were accustomed to moving anywhere from every 6 months to 2 years. But during that time, I was cradle Catholic. I was raised in the Catholic Church, and no matter where we were living, Egypt, Indonesia, Australia, we always kind of found our home base in our local parish, praying the family rosary. So definitely those memories are all intermingled in my young life as well.
Yeah, what would that have been like for you as a young person? I guess give us the ages of how long that went on for, up until about what age with your family, and yeah, what did you learn? When did Jesus really become someone who was alive for you? This is real. This Catholic faith is real. Was it just something you kind of soaked in from very early on, and or was there a moment when sort of the lights went on? Explain for us how that went.
Sure. I think the answer is yes, both, all of the above. So I think definitely was raised in that culture of Catholicism growing up. Through about second grade, I had lived overseas out of the United States. We moved back to the U.S. And then when I was a senior in high school, we actually moved abroad again to Saudi Arabia. And I think that was a moment of awakening for me, because when we lived there, we actually had to attend church underground. We had to be completely secretive about our location, which was, located within an embassy, and it was all top secret. And I think for the first time in my life, it became very appealing, because here I was probably 17 years old, and I was being a rebel by going to Mass and partaking in the sacraments. So I think that was one of my earlier moments of awakening. After that, I think the next moment was at the time when I was applying to college. I have a long history of family members attending Notre Dame University, going back to my grandfather and my father and uncles and various family members. And that was always my dream. And so I had applied to Notre Dame, and then I went to visit this little Catholic university where my brother was attending, called Franciscan University of Steubenville, with absolutely no intention of going there, but I went to visit to appease my parents, and I felt something different there. And I wasn't sure if I liked that or not, but it was very appealing. And so at the end of that weekend, I said a prayer that I didn't really expect much of, but I said, God, if you want me to come to this university, you have to change my heart, because right now my heart is for Notre Dame. And over the next couple of weeks, I just kind of put that prayer out there. And at the time that I finally received my acceptance letter from Notre Dame, which was a really great moment, I knew at that point that that I was going to go to this other university, Franciscan University of Steubenville.
And how do you explain the appeal? Can you share anything further about that experience of this sense that that maybe you were being drawn? I don't know, just maybe go a little bit deeper into that for us, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. I think I would describe it as, when I first arrived, something felt different, and I was trying to put my finger on what that different was. And part of the different, I think, was that the kids there, the students, they treated me differently. They looked at me differently. I felt like they were looking at me and talking to me in a very personal sense. And I attended several different events with university students there, and I think by the end of that weekend, I was able to put my finger on it and say that the thing that's different here is that God is very present here, and God is very present in these students, and that was very attractive to me.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And let's go back a little bit, and we can come back to the college years, but I'd like to hear a little bit more about what was the experience like as you were traveling around as a young person with your family. What was the schooling type of environment like? I guess even more of what I want to get at is what were the other young people your age like that you were coming into contact with? Were you coming into contact with them in some sort of a school environment? Were you homeschooled? Was there some way of educating where you were kind of mixing with some peers? What were peers like that you were encountering? Did they seem to have a strong faith as well? Or was it more of a worldly type of existence? And what was that all like?
Sure. So I completed up through first half of second grade overseas, and we were in traditional schools. Typically, wherever we were, there would either be either an American or a British school that we were attending. So English language schools, wherever we were. And I think I was probably too young to really notice too much else, apart from the fact that they were mostly what we call expatriates like us. So either Americans or Europeans attending those schools, even in the foreign countries that we were in.
Mm-hmm. All right. Yes. And so then with high school in Saudi Arabia, what was that? Was that similar? Were the expatriate peers, were they also, was it a strong bond with this underground Catholic church, or was it a bit different than that?
So that was very different. The other students that we attended with in Saudi, although we were attending a British high school, a British school, it was K through 12. The expatriates in Saudi Arabia were mostly other families from the Middle East. So people who were not native to Saudi Arabia. So Lebanese people, Pakistani people, Indian people whose families were working in that country. So actually, I only knew one other Christian girl. She was not Catholic, but she was Christian in the whole school. So I think at that point, that probably made our family unit a little bit stronger, because I was there with my two younger brothers. My two older brothers were already at college. So just, the five of us being there and trying to live a Catholic life in a very non-Christian country.
Mm-hmm. And was the Catholic faith something that was handed on to your parents by their parents? Was it pretty solid in the generational line, or did they have something of a shift in their lives? Or how was the Catholic faith handed on down through the generations to you?
Well, both of my grandparents on both sides, I would say, are very strong Catholics. And so it was handed on generationally like that. My father's parents and then his grandparents, so my great-grandparents, were first-generation immigrants from Germany and very devout Catholics. I have young memories of my great-grandfather. Even in his older age, he had a circular driveway, and he would walk around and around his circular driveway praying the rosary with his rosary beads. So that was something that I always witnessed on both sides of the family.
Wow, that's terrific. Yes. Anything else that you'd like to share about the early life? We're about a minute and a half to the break, but anything else that comes to mind that you'd like to share with us?
I think something else that comes to mind is that early on, starting in grade school, my mom had instilled a very deep pro-life respect in all of us. I would go to the abortion clinic to pray when we were living in Wisconsin with her, and my family also started to participate in foster care, welcoming young kids into the house as part of our pro-life mission.
Wow, incredible. Wow, what a blessing. It brings such encouragement to me to hear these stories every Tuesday, and especially to hear this story today. Dr. Jaime Obst is who we're talking to, sharing some of her personal testimony. We are on holy ground. In hearing it, I do believe in hearing how God is at work in the life of each person. He is working in your life, whether you see it or not. I want to invite you to say, "Come, Holy Spirit, help me to open my eyes, to open my heart, to have a sense of how you are at work in my life. Help me to invite you to be more at work in our lives." He wants to be intimately at work deep within us and throughout our lives. So let's invite him in and let's see where he's already evident, and let us say yes to keep going forward. We'll be right back with Dr. Jaime Obst. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Each weekday from 10 to 11 a.m. Eastern, the Station of the Cross brings you Mother Miriam Live.
We have a call from Ed.
Hi, good morning, Mother Miriam. I just want to tell you, you got me all fired up like you usually do. Thank you for all you do. We love you out here in Massachusetts.
Tune in from 10 to 11 a.m. Eastern for Mother Miriam Live on the Station of the Cross and our free iCatholic Radio mobile app. You can also watch the video stream every day on Facebook or on YouTube.
When I was outside of the church, there was always an unsettled feeling. There was always a feeling of something missing and something not complete. The deal clincher is we found our way to our parish, and we met just an incredible pastor. We learned things that we'd never been taught. Wouldn't be the person that I am without the church and without the sacraments, particularly the Eucharist. I can't live without it.
If you've been away from the Catholic Church, visit CatholicsComeHome.org.
Do you love listening to the Station of the Cross on your car radio, but sometimes find yourself driving outside the listening area? Never miss another minute of your favorite show. Download the iCatholic Radio app so you can listen anywhere in the world 24 hours a day. The iCatholic Radio app is available for your phone in the Apple Store or for your Android phone in Google Play. Visit thestationofthecross.com for more information.
30 seconds on the gifts of the Holy Spirit, brought to you by the Station of the Cross. The gift of wisdom helps us discern God's holy will for our lives. In the Book of Wisdom, God tells us, "Resplendent and unfading is wisdom, and she is readily perceived by those who love her, and found by those who seek her. For taking thought of her is the perfection of prudence, and he who for her sake keeps vigil shall quickly be free from care."
Simple Truth. Jim Havens here on Testimony Tuesday. We are hearing from Dr. Jaime Obst today, sharing some of her personal testimony with us. She is a Catholic wife and mother, as well as an OBGYN. And we heard about her early life in the first segment, up until the Lord calling her to go attend Franciscan University. So, Dr. Obst, you know that you're heading to Franciscan University at that point. What happened from there? How did your faith strengthen or come alive? What happened after that? I think we have an audio difficulty right now with Dr. Obst. We'll get her right back on in a moment. But again, wanted to... okay, I think we've got her right back. So, all right, Dr. Obst, did you hear the question?
I did. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
I was really blessed, Jim, at Franciscan. I had a fantastic first-year roommate who really called me on to grow in my faith and take a front seat driver's role in my faith life, to be in charge of it and to be in charge of growing it and developing a relationship with God. And I was blessed with a wonderful circle of friends and was able to grow and I think really start to understand the faith, became interested in reading more about the teachings of the church. And throughout Franciscan, I was in a pre-medical track. So that was my intention when I started there, was to go on to medical school. At Franciscan, I was introduced to mission work as well. So I had a trip my first year there, my freshman year, to Mexico. And I fell in love with mission work. I also fell in love with the Hispanic people in general. And I went back to Mexico the next year. And then I went to Ecuador in my junior and my senior year. And so that was just a really beautiful thing for me, learning about how to talk to other people about the faith. That helped me grow in my own faith as well. And it also really invigorated my desire to do medicine, because I saw not only the spiritual and the temporal needs of people, but the medical needs of people. And by the time I was in my fourth year of university and interviewing for medical schools, I also felt a strong calling to do mission work. And so discerning that, I spoke to family, I spoke to advisors, and finally I spoke to my medical school, Ohio University, who had already accepted me. And I said, I really want to pursue a degree with you, but I really feel like I need to do a year of missionary work first. And they were very gracious, and they deferred my acceptance for a year. And I fundraised like $6,000, and I went down to Ecuador, and I lived off that money and did both kind of evangelical mission work, teaching people about the faith, and then I was able to be involved in some medical missions as well. And really, again, just grew so much as a person. I think one of the amazing things that intrigued me while I was down in Ecuador was working with women and talking to them about some of the harms of contraception, and realizing that I wanted to know more about natural family planning and to be able to teach others about natural family planning. So that was a big point of growth for me while I was there.
Wow. And was that something that that you had always understood from early on in your life, just the truth about what contraception really is, the evils of it, what natural family planning is all about? Is there any other further story there in terms of how that was a passion for you to share that truth?
It was not something that came from my younger life. I think I really saw that when I started to do missions, and then especially being in Ecuador. I found that when I was working in small towns or in the barrios, in the slums, that the only people I was working with were women, because the men were nowhere to be found. And as I kind of talked to these women more and learned more about their lives, it was evident that there were a lot of unhealthy relationships between them and their husbands, that they were gone for a long time, or maybe they weren't even married. But still, these women recognized that injustice. They felt that injustice, and they really wanted to, when I was talking about, how we can serve God and how our bodies serve God, and kind of starting to introduce these topics to them, there was such a hunger for wanting to be treated that way and wanting to be able to work in a cooperative way with their bodies, such as natural family planning would allow for. But realizing myself that I didn't have all the tools to make that possible for them. Obviously, a lot of social issues that needed to be worked on as well. But that really started to light a fire, I think, within me, that natural family planning had, there was something for me with that was going to be a bigger part of my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And is there any other particular story that you can mention of any of your time doing the missionary work where that kind of exemplifies, can give us a sense of how God was alive in that, how you saw him showing up in the lives of the people that you were serving, or how you saw him showing up in your own life more fully as you were serving?
Oh, so many, so many things happened during the course of that year that really showed me that God was there. He was taking care of me. I mean, so many times I was just living as a young, probably 21, 22-year-old woman in this foreign country. I remember one time I was coming home. I was living with a family out in kind of the barrios in the slums, and I had to take several buses to get back to their house, public transportation, and I wasn't really paying attention. The buses are not well marked, and I thought that if I got on this particular bus, it would take me into the right neighborhood and I could walk home. I judged poorly. I got on this bus and I realized it was taking me into a part of the city that I wasn't familiar with, that it was further away from my home, and it was getting dark, and I didn't know what to do. So I thought about it for a little bit, and I thought, I just need to get off this bus. Of course, cell phones, not a thing at this time. And I had to figure out how to get from this part of the city where I didn't know, in the dark, very dangerous. I was not in a good neighborhood. I knew that, how to get back home. So I got off the bus, and I thought, wow, this is probably another bad decision, because there were no lights on the streets. Nothing was open. And I was nothing short of terrified. So I thought, I'm going to get out my rosary. I'm going to pray the rosary. I'm going to walk in the right direction, and I'm going to pray that I see a cab. And that's what I did. I started praying. I prayed for God's protection around me. Could think of all the terrible things that could happen to a white gringo girl in this area of the city. And I just kept walking and praying the rosary, and all of a sudden, this cab pulled up. I mean, not a single car had driven past me. And I wasn't even, a full 2 decades into the rosary, and this taxi pulled up, and I hailed him down and was able to get back into the right neighborhood and get home that night. And that was, one of so many stories that just showed me, God he had me. He was taking care of me.
Wow, so powerful. Yeah, let me ask you if you might share another story, maybe in the line of what kind of jumps out to me is there are so many young women who are struggling in this culture, trying to figure out what it even means to be a young woman. Same is true for young men, trying to figure out what it means to be a man. But what was your experience like? How was the Blessed Mother perhaps helpful, or how did God guide you to really help to learn what it means to be a virtuous woman? Is there any story, anything particular that you can mention that might be helpful for the audience on that?
I'm not thinking of any particular story necessarily along that vein, Jim, but I guess another story that really jumps out to me in terms of seeing what I needed to learn and how I needed to help while I was there. I was for the first few months, there was another missionary with me, a friend from Franciscan University, and he and I were giving a talk to a group of parents in a Catholic school that was connected to a church there. The name of the the neighborhood we were working in was called Lucha de los Pobres, which is literally translated "the fight of the poor," was the name of their barrio, their slum. And there were 2 Jesuit priests there who had allowed us to come in and give this talk to the parents. And we told them we wanted to talk to them about theology of the body and kind of introducing some of these topics about contraception and natural family planning. And then we hope to be able to follow up with some other classes afterwards. And as we gave this talk, the people in the audience were asking these, fantastic questions. Like, one woman raised her hand and she said, "Oh my goodness, like, I never realized that sterilization was against the teaching of the church. What can I do now?" And, another man raises his hand and says, basically, I have the same question. And the 2 priests who were in charge of this parish and the parish school actually started to argue with us. And started to actually not only argue with us, but argue with the teachings of the church, which we were presenting, and saying, well, sterilization is not always a sin, and contraception can be used. And my fellow friend missionary and I were just aghast, thinking, how can I even be saying this? And so we did our best to keep our composure and try and convey the truth here. But I guess that was a big learning point for me as well, that, we need not only to evangelize in terms of these teachings of the church, but we need to make sure, for myself, that I needed to be sure that we were praying for priests, for good holy priests, because the priests had so much more weight, in terms of what their parishioners would believe than what these young gringos were here telling them. And so it just opened my eyes to not only the need within the laity, I think, but also the need within the clergy, and the need for good holy clergy that can also be consistent with this message within the church.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And as you went on then from the missionary work, although I would love to continue to just ask you to tell stories about that time, but I guess moving along, we go into your medical school time then, and during that time, I guess we're going to hit the break. But anything quick on just medical school and how God was showing up during that time for you?
I guess another huge blessing in medical school, my roommate, who's now my sister-in-law, was another fellow Catholic. We both kind of entered into medical school wanting to know and learn together, and we were a huge support to each other as we went through medical school. We needed that support.
Yeah, terrific. All right, we're going to pick it back up here with Dr. Jaime Obst when we get back. And find out a bunch more. I want to ask her about discerning vocation, what was going on throughout her life in all of this time as a young woman, trying to discern, okay, what does God have for me in terms of definitive vocation? Was that difficult? Was that easy? I do know ultimately the Lord led her to a great husband, and we'll get to talk about that for a moment as well. But we'll be right back on The Simple Truth. Stay tuned.
Here at the Station of the Cross, we proudly bring the truths of the Catholic faith to countless listeners through radio and mobile devices, and we're grateful for the feedback we've received.
I grew up Catholic Church, haven't been in the Catholic Church for decades, but I'm in the process of working my way back for the simple reason that I needed a place to listen to pro-life, pro-family messages. Catholic radio is it. It's a place to hear that message without all the political bias and all that's going on News Talk Radio.
It changed my life.
It's the only station I turn on.
The Catholic station is an answer to prayer.
It just couldn't be more fulfilling.
It's helped me learn more about the faith, and it's helped me to deepen my faith as a result of that.
It's on continuously in my house, day and night. You can't imagine how much I receive from that channel.
If you've been blessed by listening to the Station of the Cross, let us know. Call 1-877-888-6279, extension 112. Then share your testimonial with us.
By 10 weeks, stimulation of the upper eyelid causes a downward rolling of the eye. The fetus yawns and often opens and closes the mouth. All organs and extremities found in adults are present in the 10-week unborn baby. Human life is sacred. Think about it. coalitionforlife.com.
The Catholic Current, bringing Christ to the world and the world to Christ.
Really, I just want my kid to get a good SAT score. Jesus is a mascot, but it's not the important work. And honestly, that's not what I'm paying for.
That's probably the vast majority of parents sending their kids to Catholic schools across the country. The response has to be, Jesus isn't just a mascot. Jesus is the one thing necessary.
The Catholic Current, 5 p.m. Eastern, from the Station of the Cross and on the iCatholic Radio mobile app.
Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here with our guest today, Dr. Jaime Obst, Catholic wife and mother, as well as OBGYN. She is sharing some of her personal testimony with us today, and highly recommend, if you're just tuning in, to go back and listen to the first half of this show. You can do so by going to the iCatholic Radio mobile app. You can listen to the podcast there. You can also go to the stationofthecross.com and listen there, or various YouTube channels and our Facebook page, The Simple Truth, if you want to watch the video of this interview as well. But Dr. Obst, going back to medical school, before we move on from there, anything else in terms of medical school that you'd want to share?
Sure. So medical school, my medical experience was probably fairly consistent with what I've heard other people have experienced, but not a lot of support for anyone with the intention of being an OBGYN that doesn't prescribe contraception. I think there was a very strong and powerful, very active pro-choice group, Medical Students for Choice, at our university. And so my roommate, now my sister-in-law, and I, with 2 other students, we formed the first pro-life chapter, so Medical Students for Life, at our medical school, and that's still ongoing today. And that was a battle, but it was definitely worthwhile. And I think throughout medical school, I actually entered medical school thinking that I wanted to be anything but an OBGYN because, as I told God, I said, I'm very pro-life, God. I will serve you in the pro-life movement, but I do not want to have to deal with those tough issues on a daily basis as an OBGYN. So I'll do anything but that. And that was really my thought going into medical school. And then that was further sealed by a pretty negative experience I had working with an OBGYN in my first year of medical school, who was asking women on their second C-section, are we tying your tubes this time? And it was so distasteful that I really had a bad opinion of the whole profession. And then after my first year of medical school, my roommate and I went to the medical conference for the American Academy of Fertility Care Professionals, which is a scientific gathering of physicians and nurses and practitioners around the country who use and teach the Creighton model of natural family planning. And it was such a transformational experience. I mean, here I had been told by so many people that if you're an OBGYN and you don't prescribe contraception, you would starve. No one would come to you. And yet I was in this room surrounded by hundreds of professionals who were doing just that. And it was like one of those moments where you feel like there's this ray of light on you and God is talking to you. And God was telling me through the whole conference, like, I need you to be an OBGYN. And so that was really the pivotal moment for me between my first and second years of medical school. And from there was really no turning back.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And then what happened from there, your discernment after medical school, where you were going to go, how you were going to serve, what happened after that?
Well, as you might imagine, it's not always easy to find a residency where you wouldn't be prescribing birth control pills, and you wouldn't be participating in tubal ligations, and you wouldn't be obligated to perform abortion, termination of pregnancy. And so I did my homework and I looked around the country, and I had kind of come up with a very short list. And one of the places on that list was here in Buffalo. And after I had come here, I worked here for a month as a fourth-year medical student. I really liked what I saw. And there's a matching, almost like a lottery program. And fortunately, I matched into this program and was able to train here.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah, we'll come back to the medical journey and all of that, your professional journey there in just a moment. But first, it is a topic that again is so important for so many, for everyone as they're growing up. There comes this big question of, Lord, what are you calling me to in terms of vocation? How did that play out as you were coming up as a young person? What was that discernment like that ultimately led you to marriage and your husband, Dan, who I happen to know is a terrific guy. You're very blessed. But how did that go? And just what can you share with us on that?
Sure. I think for myself, there was always a conflict because, even as early as high school and then through college, I felt called to be a physician, but I also felt called to marriage and to being a wife and a mother. And of course, those are at odds. It's hard to be a physician. It's an extremely demanding profession. The training is extremely rigorous, and so is being married, and so is motherhood. So those were always at odds. And even though I felt both calls, and they seemed to be opposed to each other, I think by the grace of God, I just moved forward. And I remember in particular meeting with a spiritual director in my junior year of Franciscan University. And I sat down with him and I said, Father, I'm really struggling with this. I feel called to medicine, but I really also feel called to married life and to being a mother. And this Franciscan friar, God bless him, he just looked at me and he said, so are you engaged? And I said, no. And he said, well, are you dating anyone? No. I said, so I'm not seeing the conflict here. And it was kind of funny. And in retrospect, well, it wasn't funny in the moment. In retrospect, it's funny. And but really that point hit home. Like I was not dating anyone. I was not dating anyone all through college, against my desires, of course. But I really felt like that was one of the ways that God said, I need you to keep moving forward. I need you to keep moving forward. And because I was single, I really had that amazing opportunity to go to Ecuador and serve down there for a year and then start medical school and get through medical school. For myself personally, I'm so glad that I was already halfway through residency when I met my husband, because it is, as I said, training is very, very rigorous. And I know a lot of wonderful couples who have been married in medical school or earlier in residency and done very well. For myself, I think God knew me and he knew that I needed to be very close to finishing when he brought my husband and our first child into my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, amazing. And then, so in Buffalo, New York, I don't know if when you were moving around in those early days with your family, if you had ever been in a climate quite like Buffalo, New York, but what was it like up in Buffalo, New York, and what was your time like, coming through, I guess you're beginning to work there, you're married, your family is going, and then just your time at Sisters Hospital there?
Sure. So I was married. OBGYN residency is a 4-year residency track. So we were married in my 3rd year of residency, and our first son was born in my last year of residency. And then I took a job working for Sisters Hospital. And we really, very quickly after I moved to Buffalo, within the first year that I moved here, I really fell in love with the city. With the climate. I had lived in a cold climate before, and it's really a beautiful 4 seasons kind of climate, and grew to love the area. So it was not too difficult of a transition in that respect. And then, my husband's family is from this area, and they are wonderful, and we are so very close with them, and blessed that they're part of our lives and our kids' lives now. My work at Sisters was phenomenal. I was blessed to be working in a fantastic office. I have a great mix of patients. Some are very similar to me in that they're very Catholic and looking for a physician who's Catholic and respectful of people who use natural family planning. I have, some Spanish-speaking only patients. I have some, patients who are share different beliefs, and it's just been. I had such a wonderful patient base. I love my patients so much, and also blessed to work in a teaching environment within the hospital as well. Working both with residents, training residents, as well as medical students. We had a lot of medical students come through the program as well. And that was a great part of the job that I absolutely loved, because I had been the beneficiary of learning from some amazing physicians ahead of me. And I really wanted to give back in that regard as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you're in this environment at a Catholic hospital where your work can flourish. You can do your work in good conscience, not being coerced into doing anything that would be unethical or evil, and so you're going along, and then some conflict arises fairly recently. Share with us about that. What happened?
Sure. So just like many people are facing around the country now, the coronavirus pandemic and the subsequent COVID vaccinations arose. And very quickly, I suspected after the development and the release of the vaccines that would become something that was mandatory for us. I knew it was just a matter of time for healthcare workers. So the initial phase of vaccination within the hospital, as with most healthcare workers around the country, was in December, so a year ago now, December and January. At that time, it was not required. At that time, I was very newly pregnant with our 5th child, and I had serious reservations about safety of the vaccine because there were no studies done on pregnant women or long-term outcomes of women who are exposed to the vaccine. And so I was able to decline the vaccine with very little. People didn't really didn't bat an eye. They thought, okay, you're pregnant, I get it. While I was on maternity leave with my daughter, our governor here in New York State, Andrew Cuomo, on his way out the door, left us with his parting gift, which was the vaccination mandate for all healthcare workers in New York State. And very quickly, once Kathy Hochul took office, it became known that religious exemptions to the vaccine were not to be accepted. They were not allowed. And this all kind of precipitated while I was still on maternity leave, kind of, waiting to come back to work. So I very quickly started to research my options, because I knew, and I had known for some time, that because of the connection with all 3 of the available vaccines, either in their research or in the development or manufacturing of them, they had all employed the use of stem cell lines that are derived from an aborted fetus or fetuses, and that was just not something that I was comfortable taking. So I started to research my options. I actually wrote a very well thought out letter of medical exemption and submitted it anyway to my hospital, stating that I was unable to accept this vaccine, and these were my reasons. It was never granted. It was acknowledged that it had been received, and that was pretty much all that I was able to get from the hospital. I took part in a legal battle. There were several legal battles ongoing within the state that were asking that religious exemptions, as part of the First Amendment, the right to practice religion freely, that those would be granted. And that decision went all the way up. We applied for emergency appeal at the Supreme Court. And yesterday, the Supreme Court stated that they would not hear the emergency appeal. So that is where we stood with that. The deadline for receiving the vaccine had been pushed back several times, but eventually it came to the point, December 3rd, that if I was not vaccinated beyond that date, I couldn't work. And so I submitted a letter of resignation, and December 3rd was my last day at the hospital.
Wow. We're talking with Dr. Jaime Obst, sharing some of her personal testimony here with us. We're going to come right back after the break and find out more about where we're leaving off here. How has her faith been helpful to her in this time, and how has she perhaps grown in her faith in a time where facing persecution from an area that she would not expect it, and just the difficulty that it must be, the fortitude that is needed to continue to stick to your conscience, to stick to doing what's right when pressure just becomes more and more and more to do the thing they're trying to get you to do. We're going to be right back with Dr. Jaime Obst. Stay tuned.
This is Franciscan Media's Saint of the Day for December 14th. Today we celebrate St. John of the Cross. Born in Spain in 1541, John was ordained a Carmelite priest at 25. He soon took up the work of reform, but the price was high. Misunderstanding, opposition, persecution. John was even imprisoned for a time by his own religious order. Its leaders opposed his determination to observe and promote the primitive Carmelite rule, which emphasized austerity, poverty, and discipline. In prison, John came to know the cross acutely, to experience the dying of Jesus as he sat month after month in his dark, narrow cell with only his God as companion. But John also came to life in prison, spending hours uttering poetry. In the darkness of the dungeon, the mystic poet in John of the Cross flowered and was captured in his spiritual canticle. His prose masterpiece, Ascent to Mount Carmel, reveals his gifts as a psychologist-theologian. Today's saint underlines the gospel paradox. The cross leads to resurrection, agony to ecstasy, darkness to light, abandonment to possession, denial of self to union with God. John of the Cross died in 1591 after a short but full life and was canonized in 1726.
The new Saint of the Day app is available now for your smartphone or tablet. From Franciscan Media, this has been Saint of the Day.
We offer several ways to view our programming grid, including at our website, thestationofthecross.com, and on our iCatholic Radio app. Just click the menu icon in the top left portion of our app and select the link to our programming grid. That's at thestationofthecross.com and on our free iCatholic Radio app for Android and Apple mobile devices.
Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here on this Testimony Tuesday. Dr. Jaime Obst is our guest, sharing some of her personal testimony. She's a Catholic wife and mother, OBGYN as well. And where we left off, so submitted the letter of resignation really because you were being pushed to do so. It was, I guess, let me ask you that. Why the letter of resignation rather than, I guess they were threatening to fire you? What was the thought process there?
Sure. So with when a physician works within a hospital, we have what are called medical privileges or staff privileges at that hospital, which gives me the ability to admit and treat patients within that hospital, which I need to do in order to deliver women within a hospital and also to perform surgery. And so anytime I would apply for a license in another state or apply for medical privileges in another hospital, one of the questions that's always asked is, have you ever had your medical privileges removed or revoked, which is usually done in cases of gross misconduct. And because I did not want to have to answer that question, yes, I chose to resign instead of being fired.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, so you're prudentially trying to figure out how to navigate all of this as you go, knowing one thing, that you don't want to be coerced into doing something that is against your conscience, taking this injection that you know, yes, in either all the vaccines that have been put out are either manufactured with or tested with what are called these aborted fetal cell lines, which we've gone into on this program quite extensively. But really, it's a barbaric practice that really is being used to to produce these things or test these things. And so for the same reason, I would never either have this injection myself. So I certainly agree with your grounds. And, what would you say to other people right now, for whatever reason, if they don't want to take this injection, maybe they have different reasons why they wouldn't want to take it, and they're being threatened with their job or in some other way they're being pressured or coerced? Any encouragement for them, and anything further you'd want to share about how your faith has been helpful in this time?
Absolutely. I think the biggest thing that I would say to anyone in a similar situation is that you will never regret following your conscience. Even though I will say that if you had asked me 2 years ago what my future career plans were, my plan would have been to stay here and continue to do what I was doing and retire from this hospital. I loved where I was working. I loved who I was working with, and I love my patients. And I really couldn't have pictured myself anywhere else. But going through this process, realizing that I couldn't stay here because I would not comply with that obligatory vaccination, which would violate my conscience, it forced me to look at other options. It forced me to realize that there could be an alternate path for myself, for my family. And the day that was my first day, quote unquote, unemployed, I would say was absolutely a day of freedom and a day of just peace and joy. And those are not words that I guess would normally come out of someone's mouth who had just resigned from a very happy and a very comfortable position. But I think that, back in the early part of this year, my husband and I had talked about this. Like I said, we saw the writing on the wall. We knew it was coming. And we looked at each other and we said, is this the hill that we die on? And we decided yes. And I think from that moment, God just galvanized us, and we knew what we had to do. We didn't necessarily know how to get there, but we knew what we had to do. And our faith was absolutely at the core of the decision. And it was also the wind beneath our wings. It was the power that gave us the strength to do what we had to do. I mean, my last couple of weeks at the hospital were some of my hardest days, just saying goodbye to people, saying goodbye to patients. It was extremely difficult, but it also gave me so much consolation to know other people knew the fight that I was in. Other people knew the decision that I had made. And people came up to me privately and said, oh my goodness, Dr. Obst, I know that you're not taking the vaccine, and I'm not either. And it gives me so much extra courage, to know that you're doing this and we're in this together. Unfortunately, I know also quite a few people who in the end could not give up their job or felt that they could not give up their job and ended up taking the vaccine against their conscience. And unfortunately, that's a decision that no one can undo. And I think that if I could say one thing to someone who's still in that position and needing to make that decision, if you think that you can't live without your job, think again. Maybe you can. Maybe it looks different than it did before. Maybe your job will be different. But what good is it if we gain the whole world and we lose our soul?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, only a few minutes to go. What else would you like to share with us in these final minutes?
I think, Jim, it's been a very eye-opening process for me. It's been very eye-opening to know that this Catholic hospital that I thought hired me because I am a woman of my convictions and I hold convictions that are consistent with the Catholic Church, that hospital really didn't stand up for me, didn't fight, back to the state and say, hey, listen, we have good employees here who have true, deeply held religious convictions that will not allow them to take this vaccine. We can't let them go. I just did not see any movement at all from the hospital going back to the state, or even any feelings of sympathy or support from our hospital leadership. And up until this point, I had always thought that I was working within a hospital that really held tightly to its convictions. And this whole experience made me see otherwise. Not to say it's there aren't good people working there, because there are. There are a lot of wonderful people working within the hospital walls. But I think I saw that there are other motivations at stake, and they're not necessarily looking to help their employees abide by their own conscience and church teaching. And that was a difficult realization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot there that I think maybe if we can have you back on maybe a current event show and try to unpack some of the issues that you see, it'd be great to try to shine a light on them more, just so we can understand what is going on in healthcare, specifically in Catholic healthcare, and try to figure out, okay, what are some of the challenges? What are some of the solutions that need to come forward? And I think you'd be a great voice to speak to some of that maybe sometime soon.
Great.
Yes, terrific. And so, so I just want to thank you for all the work. As one who has been the beneficiary of some of your great work as a doctor at Sisters Hospital there in Buffalo. Again, I mentioned in the beginning part of the show that you delivered our youngest son, and just a great blessing that you provide for your patients. Again, everything you would want a doctor to be. You are going to be sorely missed by so many in the Western New York area. And just want to thank you for your example as a doctor, but as your example, as you've been sharing in this show all across the board, you are a phenomenal example for all of us. And I just want to say thank you for that. Thank you so much, Dr. Jaime Obst, for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Jim.
Absolutely. All right, that's it. So please pray for the Obst family, Dr. Jaime Obst, all that they are discerning as they go forward with the Lord. And let's pray for one another, that everybody can say yes to the Lord. Whatever he has for us is good. He knows what we're going through. Let's trust him. Let's stick with him. Let's choose the good. Let's reject evil and sin. And no matter what, let us say yes to the Lord and to whatever he has next for us, even when it's unclear, even when it's difficult, even when we have to pay a price that we do not want to pay. Let's just look at his example. Look at the example of our Lord. He paid that price for us. Let's love him enough to do likewise. God bless you.
Hardwood Mall underwrites with the Station